Hi, welcome to Talking in Stations, an EVE Online podcast recorded live while streaming, for better or worse. I'm your host, Matterall. Today we're going to be talking about how the DRF war ends, and that is Drone Region Federation War that has been occupying us for the last 2 months. And we'll also talk about CCP's changes to fuel consumption by capital ships. Joining us for this is going to be Carneros.
Good morning.
And Caleb.
Hey, guys.
We'll also have Dunk from Brave.
Hello, everyone.
And Killa B, now from NC.
Hey, what's up?
All right, guys, welcome. We're getting off to a late start as a program note because the internet's on fire. But now that we got that worked out, let's go back to, we're going to start off with the DRF war ending because that was the first part of last week's news. And can anybody tell me, like, maybe Dunk, you were there, what was going on in the southern part of that war and where is it now?
Well, sorry, but I mean, Brave wasn't super involved in that war. I mean, we helped out a lot with some of the FCON stuff, but that was mainly the DRF GOTG stuff was up north, wasn't it? Away from where we were.
Yeah, that's the part that ended. So I'll go ahead and, or Killa B, do you know much about that war? You weren't actually in it, but
I mean,
why don't you run us through like what happened from beginning to end, just so, just for like 2 minutes, and then I can fill in whatever is not there.
All right. So it all started with Tri deciding to end their relations with the DRF. Tri and the DRF have been long-standing allies for a while. They've been holding their space next to each other for a long time. Tri decided to reset them, and basically, as Tri and the Vanguard Coalition left the DRF, they filled that spot with the Phoenix Federation, which was led by FCON. And in response to that, Tri and Vanguard started attacking the Phoenix Federation, which is, like I said, mainly based in the Mencia area. That's what they staged. And with that, obviously, being a part of the DRF committed forces to the south. They deployed forces from Geminate, where XIX and co live, and even the drone coalition or drone control unit from further up north, Peregrine Falls area, deployed some forces south to assist FCON versus Tri. And yeah, then like you said, like 2 months ago, roughly, Sword Dragon started an attack on Peregrine Falls from Tino, sort of. I mean, actually from Venal. They went in through Venal and set up a staging there. They dropped the Keep Star, which died, and then they like a week later they managed to get a staging 40s up and started harassing the area. And they've been having skirmishes and bigger fights as well up in Peregrine Falls over Sotios and other structures over the last couple of months. A couple of Zoff systems changed hands. And now is it already a week ago or some days ago, Sword Dragon announced that they were pulling out of Peregrine Falls. They were deploying all their forces back to their home in Decline, which is obviously very interesting because that allows the Russians to focus back on the south, where in the meantime FCON and their coalition has kind of died. The Phoenix Federation wasn't able to fight back against the constant pressure that Tri and other people put onto them, and they've sort of crumbled and have now more or less fallen apart. FCON has been offered space in Ethereum Reach, which they are moving to the remains of FCON, and lots of FCON corporations have been moving out to other alliances like Test, I think, and something like that.
Wow. I thought I was going to have to fill in gaps. I don't have to fill in any gaps. I think that's it in a nutshell. There was also some diplomatic goofiness going on during that war where people were saying the war started because of this and that. And I don't know the particulars and stuff, but there's still that backdrop of it that has a little bit of, diplomatic playing around that went on. But essentially, that was the war in a nutshell. Fantastic review. Were you? Did you participate in it?
We went to some timers here and there, but we didn't really take a major role in any of it. We, when I was still in PL, I did go and help Sword Dragon to get a staging Fortizar up in Peregrine Falls. I took some Supers and Titans there, and we just sat on the Fortizar. We killed one abandoned fleet. That's, I guess, our most significant participation. We did put a lot of pressure onto FCON with PL, where we just camped their staging a lot and everything around their staging, which kind of boxed them into their pocket. They weren't really able to leave their staging pocket, which made the members really angry. And caused some internal drama, which also helped, obviously, breaking them.
Yeah. Now, Dunk, you were in Brave, so you guys were part of this through the Legacy Coalition part of it. Did you not see any combat?
I think we did. I think, along with Legacy, went to go help out FCON a number of times in fights and stuff like that. But again, Brave's role is often with Legacy is holding down catch and holding down impasse in some of these bigger fights. So we would send people up, but we weren't kind of fully deploying that way because then there's kind of no one watching the ship back in catch.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the large takeaways are that FC basically diminished, and Darkness and the Guardians Coalition actually retreated from the north after invading from the north. So Triumvirate accomplished what they wanted to do, which was take out FCON. But Darkness didn't accomplish what they wanted to do, unless all they wanted to do was exact a price for what DRF had done, which was to let Test stage in their area while they attacked Darkness's territory. So this was payback. That's how they see it. But when I look at it, there was the way this ended was that the leader of the Darkness Coalition said, "Yeah, we're done, blah, blah, blah," basically. And I'm not making fun of him. That's what he wrote, blah, blah, blah. And then retreated up north. And the leadership of the DRF, and I wouldn't call Manfred Sidious leadership, but he's an FC there, wrote this piece, I guess it was on Reddit, and said, "This is a great fight. Everybody had fun. Both, teams were bloodied, and Darkness is going back with like no honor lost kind of thing. And, point taken. We got punished for letting Test stage, in our territory while they invited their space." Now, it was an overly generous thing, I thought. It was like really letting.
There's like 12 layers of stories there that we just don't aren't hearing. I mean, what the fuck is going on?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that DRF really just wants stability, right? They were being invaded and they really just want stability. So they're not going to antagonize Darkness on their way out. But it also feels like Darkness didn't really accomplish what they were supposed to accomplish, which was to show that they could take territory, or, be an imposing force on their own. They jumped in with like everything they had, a capital fleet, and they planted a Keep Star, which is really bold.
Keep in mind, if you're in history going back to listen to this, that was the first time, I believe, that anyone ever started an aggression with dropping a Keep Star in someone's space. It was a huge statement.
Yeah, it was. And the statement was also pushed back. They lost that Keep Star. Yeah, sure. They took a lot of ships with them.
They barely lost it.
Right. Okay. So they barely lost it. Then they needed help to put in.
Now wait a second. That's like, we barely lost to PL. Like, come on. I mean, this is Eve. There's no barely in the Eve.
I'm giving Carneros room there, but it was still a loss. And it was, and they actually got lucky that they didn't lose a bunch of supers who were now vulnerable on their way out. Some things went wrong and they weren't able to DRF wasn't able to capitalize on killing Darkness as they retreated. But also they needed help in order to take over territory, to take over that system, right? So if Darkness's point was to say, coming out of Eve Vegas, we're going to do this on our own, we're strong enough, they weren't successful in anything except penetrating and taking out a few key things for DRF. I mean, would you agree? How do you guys see this? Is this like, okay, we had a good fight, thanks guys, we'll see you later, point proven, you guys know not to mess with us, goodbye? Because to me, it looks like we don't need PL, we don't need NC, we're going to do this on our own. Oh, we can't do it on our own. The guys want a rat for the winter, let's go back up north.
So there's a couple things to it. I think it was a really great thing for GOTG as a coalition because they've sort of tested what they're capable of, and I mainly spectated it, and I was pretty impressed by the form-ups for the staging. Fortisa, for example, they formed 1,200 people. They had a big super fleet, big Titan fleet, a lot of faxes. They had 100 fax for the Sotio timer, and they still had like 3 or 4 subcap fleets. So that's a very impressive showing. I think it was really important for them as a coalition to kind of see what are we capable of, to like assess their military strength, which you can't really if you just skirmish around with Horde or like fight snuff occasionally in low sec. You can't really see what you're capable of. To actually take down somebody like the DRF, it would have basically Sword Dragon would have needed some commitments from other alliances, and I don't think these alliances that he was maybe hoping for were willing to commit to that because of there's no real reason for them to commit to something like that, right? For the allies of GOTG, the real enemy is not really the DRF, right? So why would we
And it's a sticky business, right? Because they have relationships with DRF too. So it's not like they're not our enemy. Why should we bother? It's like we kind of have a relationship with them.
Yeah, there's a relationship that's important. That's an important relationship, but that really breaks down to, we have a PLNC and the DRF. They have a mutual respect for each other. There's no written agreements. That's something that a lot of people always think, but there's just not. This is the same as like GOTG. The goons, Mitani and Bot, they like to call it blue trolls, and I guess that's sort of what it is, right? Like at the end of the day, we're not exactly like blue. When a DRF gang comes into like our space and roams around, we kill them, but we wouldn't like invade each other. But we don't have any nips or naps or whatever written down. Like there's no formal agreements. It's just that we know, okay, if we start to fuck with them, they're gonna start to fuck with us, and it's just gonna be bad for both of us. So yeah, we didn't really commit to any of those like bigger stuff because we don't want to ruin our relationship with an entity that could be, that could be a potential ally in future wars, or at least could, sort of be one stable front, I guess you could say. Because if you imagine our space getting attacked, it would be nice to know, okay, well, we're not going to get any heat from the east because that's where the DRF is, and the DRF is cool with us. So
Right.
it wouldn't make sense for us to commit to anything over there, which is why we didn't. And I think that's what Sword realized. He's like, okay, so these commitments aren't going to happen, so I might as well just pull out, because alone I'm not really, it's no point for me as a group alone to do this. But I still think it was a success for them because they saw what they were capable of, and it was a great 2 months of content.
Can I ask a short question? Because I read this or hear you saying that this was kind of a testing of strength, a sharpening of teeth or a probe of some sort. And I see a little bit of a parallel with this and the Northern Kerfuffle that the goons were doing. When do you think the actual staging or attack can come from any of these entities? Because if this is just testing the waters, when is the big one coming?
Well, I mean, you'll notice when the big one is coming, because it'll be a very openly, like, people will notice. But I think you can't really compare what the goons did to what GOTG did, because GOTG did a full-scale deployment. They did move all their supers. They did everything. They gave it their best shot, right? And they did all they could. And like, to see what is our full capability, right? They really saw what is our full capability as a coalition. They deployed everything they had. And what the goons did in the north was I don't even know what it was. Like, it was some sort of meme deployment with like all the doctrines they had were basically garbage. The only good one they had was like Foons and Jackdaws, and the Foons, they just flew, like they just completely piloted them wrong. and I mean, obviously the Armor Hurricanes were absolute garbage. But yeah, so I don't really think you can compare it at all because the Goons didn't really deploy with their full forces or anything. They had like 1,200, 1,300 people that deployed up north, but they didn't bring supers. They just sort of, I don't know. Goons sort of
Well,
just
they-
whiffed it.
They brought a bunch of dreadnoughts that they sacrificed to you.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I wouldn't really compare those two.
How many dreadnoughts did you kill? How many of them died on your shores?
I think it was like 180 or something, 170.
It's a lot of dreadnoughts.
Couple snuff dreads. Yeah, they deployed like 600 or something. So there's still a lot of them left in the north, as you could see when that
Mhm.
rag died, which a lot of people think was mine, apparently. But
That's right. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, that's not my rag. It's a
Okay.
corp mate or like an ex-corp mate of mine.
Is that your brother? That was the other rumor.
No, he's not my brother. I don't know why he said that. Like,
Okay, so let's set this up for people that haven't seen this. There was a rag that died, and some conversation between Boat, and that is the big red boat, and the pilot of that rag was hilarious because it sounded like almost sounded like in this climate like a sexual assault. Like he was really pushy, and then he's like, "Do you want to join me? Do you want to join our coalition and stuff?" It was just hilarious. If you haven't seen that, it was super comedic. But anyway, what's the truth behind that?
Well, the truth is, I mean, so I WhatsApp with the guy because we used to be in a corp together, and I'm obviously a very public figure, and I come from Cataclysm Enterprises. So now everybody, when they see Cataclysm Enterprises, they associate it with me. So everybody assumes like every Cataclysm Enterprises death is me. But basically, I think he just was bored or drunk or something. Could be either of the two. And because it was 4 a.m. in German time, and he's a German, right? So I think that he was either drunk or just bored at midnight. So he decided to log in and try to move it and died. But as I messaged him on WhatsApp, asked him, "Yo, why did you move your Titan? Why didn't you let me know? I could have moved you safely." And he claims it wasn't him; it was somebody else that like accessed his account and moved it. Apparently, he wrote a ticket to CCP, so we'll see if they ever respond and like if he gets his Titan back or something. But I think he it was actually him, and he was just a little bit too embarrassed to like say that, so he claimed it was somebody else. But I think it was him.
It's going through the motions.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all that happened.
Now let me be clear about something because I saw Dunk's face on the replay here, and he chagrined. Sexual assault is not funny. There, just get that clear. But Boat is very funny. So what was going on there was really funny. All right, so the DRF war comes to an end. The rag doesn't belong to Killer B. The last thing I want to hit here is Killer B is no longer in PL. It looks like he's in NC now. You want to talk about that? Why you moved?
Yeah, so I kind of said it on Reddit. That's obviously when a move like this happens, people always assume drama. People always assume. I don't know. I've seen a lot of PL is dead memes on Reddit lately and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with that. It was mainly I've been with PL for 2.5 years now. And I had a blast in 2016 with PL. It was amazing. Everything will be. Then after that, the tribute thing was a CO2 and test. It was great. And it just sort of stopped being fun. Like in the mid of 20, like I don't know, a couple months ago, I noticed that I wasn't really having fun anymore playing Eve, and I can't really blame it on PL. Maybe it was just I don't know, the game or something. But either way, I figured I wanted to change. I wanted to change of scenery, and I have a really good relation with Wins and generally with a lot of people in NC Dot because obviously I've FC'd them a couple of times, and I already knew a bunch of people in NC Dot. I've worked with them very closely, so I figured I'd join NC Dot, and maybe the change sort of brings back the spark. Play EVE Online, and I mean, so far I've been having a really good time in NC Dot. It's a lot different in terms of the internal culture is a lot different. The whole like corps have a lot stronger corp culture than they use or they do in PL for example. Obviously fleets are different as well. But it's been fun, and it's not there's no drama. Some people say there is, but it's all on good terms. I've basically told, I've talked to everybody in the peer leadership before I left. I told them, hey, these are the reasons why, and they're all cool with it. And yeah, like it's basically a transfer within the family, because we're still gonna be Forever Blues, and we're still gonna work together and dunk together. So it doesn't do that much.
People have gone back and forth before.
Yeah.
And you fell into a corporation called Shiva.
Yes.
Hoodlums.
That's
Hoodlums.
that's just because really, like, I talked to Vince and I told Vince, hey Vince, I want to be in the best possible corp for me as an FC. So if there's any upsides, for example, of being in Smell, which is the corp Vince is in, then I would want to join that. And he's like, no, it doesn't matter what corp you're in. So I decided to, hold up my promise that I gave Nidisbar, who's the current CEO of Shiva, or he's also known under the name Ajax33. He's the AT captain of NC. And I promised him, because we used to play in Nulli together back in the day. And basically, when I joined
Nulli
PL,
Secunda.
when I left Nulli Secunda, joined PL, I promised him that if I would ever leave PL again, I would join his corp. So that's what I did.
You kept your promise.
Yeah.
It's also good he's the captain of the AT team, as you pointed out, and you're pretty much running fleets now. It doesn't really matter what corporation you're in. Do you like the culture at NC? It's kind of early, but
Yeah, I mean, so far I've had fun. There's a lot of things that are different, like I said, but yeah, I mean, so far it's cool, and I really enjoy being with the people. It's a very friendly community. It's a lot different from PL. In PL internally, we all kind of just, it's a lot more. It's hard to there's no word for it.
I think
not
it's
like
called immature.
No, I wouldn't call it immature. I mean, it's just fun. Like it's sort of like a meme culture within, like, sometimes within PL, and we like all just make fun of each other, and it was fun. Like like I said, it's great. It's something that I actually miss about PL, is just the hanging out on Mumble, and we talk so much shit to each other, but on like a friendly basis. It's like it's great, right? So that's and it's just different like that in NC Dot. There's a lot more the conversations, they just sound different. But I've already succeeded very well in getting Shiva to adapt a little bit. So
you're turning it.
going well. Yeah, I'm turning it within like a week. So little side story. I joined Shiva and I was like, hey guys, let's go mining together, right? Moon mining, because I wanted to mine my moons with them. And they're like, I don't know, we've never mined before. And right now I'm sitting here in a belt with like 15 rock walls, and they're all Shiva. I basically turned Shiva into a mining corp within 2 weeks. Feels good, man.
Here we go. Well, it's the wave of the future.
Yeah.
Actually, that's great. Thanks for catching us up on DRF war and global politics there, and also telling us about yourself and how you were not a Titan pilot that got killed, which we totally believe. I'm just kidding. So next, I wanted to switch gears to something that's going to affect everybody. How do we set this up? Who has a handle on this one? We're going to talk about fuel changes first.
We covered it a little bit already, right? In the breaking news stream.
Yeah, and there is a breaking news stream that I recorded that will be published. I wanted to publish it right away, but there's been some more technical difficulties. This is a bad week for technical difficulties. But yeah, we talked about this new change that's come through. So let's talk about what that change actually is.
Well, first of all, they shrunk the size of the isotopes so that you could suddenly fit more in the same size fuel tank. We'll call it that. And then, a few people got excited about that, because that would be a small quality of life improvement for people who fly ships that consume that fuel. And then they did something which was to change the amount of fuel you need to consume to go the same distance. And then they did a little bit of tuning to that as they listened to feedback from the customers.
But the first part was very early, right? Or am I mistaken? That
it was early.
Had that
the isotopes have already been. The isotope changes have already happened in size.
Yeah, and that kind of was what was.
And everyone was
other stuff, right?
All right, hold on.
Yeah.
Before we get into the reactions and the stuff, let's let Carneros finish the fine tuning you were saying. So they fine tuned.
Well, so then they listened to some feedback posted on the forums and Reddit and places, and they went back and adjusted a little bit in places to, for example, cut a little bit better deal for Black Ops battleships or Black Ops stuff, and then also to clarify and slightly improve the situation for I think it was just jump freighters, probably not Rorquals. Shoot, I wasn't watching too carefully on that.
Yeah. All right. So now we can go into the timeline, but
Go ahead.
it was a few weeks ago, or yeah, let's just say it was a few weeks ago, they doubled the capacity of fuel you could carry on these jump ships. And then now they're saying, okay, we doubled the capacity, but now we're doubling the price. So you're going to have the same amount of distance traveled on the same amount, on double the amount of fuel you had.
You had two stages of foreshadowing of this announcement, right? First, you had the halving of the size, and then you had the increasing of the capacity, and then everything hit last week, right?
Right. So, in essence, there really wasn't much of a change but the problem was perception, and one was that everybody thought they got a benefit. Everybody thought they got a gift from CCP, that they could pile in a bunch of fuel and go twice as far on the same fuel tank, and that was a good thing. And then it seemed to get taken away, and so people got angry that they had been given something and then they'd gotten it taken away because it was a wash at at this point. It was a wash, or will be when it.
But it's
when
not.
It's
It's not going to be a wash, though. You're basically doubling the price of jumping capital ships around and jump freighters. So I'm not sure I understand the rationale. They want it to cost more to move capital ships around, which is one thing. I can understand that, but I think cost doesn't affect when people deploy capitals. And then jump freighter costs have basically doubled. So for people who don't fly jump freighters, let's say you're making a two hop jump into nullsec to deploy something. It might have cost you 25 to 30 million in fuel before. It's going to double that to 50 to 70 million going forward. So it's a significant price increase, and the impact isn't going to be felt by capital combat pilots. The impact's going to be felt by people wanting, their invulnerability fields brought in from JITA.
Well, you're adding a labor intensity and logistics strain instead of jump fatigue, right? And I personally really like that, and we were talking about this, and Apple Pierre and I was pretty much applauding it. I know that Apple is a little bit biased because he's also an ice miner, but I think it's a good thing to get rid of something like fatigue or reduce its impact, and then push that impact onto actual labor force, logistics, planning, and price.
Well, yes, again, in a rare case, I will agree with Doom Chinchilla in his analysis he did on Twitter, in which he was talking about combat capital pilots are never getting past up to 4 days of fatigue. You're never going to get close. If you get to a day of fatigue, you're fucked. So reducing the cap and that kind of stuff is basically no change to the game because no one gets up there.
I agree. If you got up there, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
no, and there was a gradual change, right? So I'm pretty.
I know, but again,
the most on this.
Well, if they wanted to affect combat capitals, they're not. They're not affecting them because the price doesn't change for them, and they're not going to have this jump fatigue thing. Does nothing for them, and all they're doing is the most hardworking people in all of EVE, the industrial people, are getting screwed, and then the people who have to buy stuff on local markets can't bring in their own stuff. They're getting screwed because their prices are going up. And the only positive thing is they're going to redo.
They're getting paid if you add value to the jump ranges and the cost. You're basically rewarding all the miners and industrialists.
Miners are the ones who are winning in this, and they're also the ones who just won with all the other recent changes about moon fracking. They just took
it's a great
all of the
wealth
alliance,
distribution thing.
the largest alliance income source, and they redistributed it to the miners so that the miners would get it. And then on top of that, they're doing more things for the miners right now.
Yeah,
it's all those hated mechanisms in the game, right? It's jump fatigue, it's fuzzy solve. All of these things are just gradually being removed or exchanged for something else, and I'm pretty sure
but they're not. But they're not. But jump fatigue is still. But jump fatigue is still a thing that effectively didn't change.
Yeah, but you need to.
And Fozzy Stav hasn't
prove a
effectively
mechanism,
changed.
Right? You need to prove this design is a good alternative to jump fatigue, and you're not going to see some huge disruptive results from this, right? So they're doing it gradually. That makes perfect sense.
But this is like testing if your winter parka works well by going out on a summer day. It has no effect. It's not a real test.
Well, a couple of things. The CCP's motivations were to inject more demand on the minerals that were no longer needed for pauses, right? We're talking about fuel, and doesn't that play into it? Like they've eliminated the demands of fuel for so many times over.
Again, I know it's a concern of theirs, but in the other changes that are coming, they're changing it to structures, Citadel type structures have to be fueled at all times, or they go directly to the final timer. And so they are doing things to increase the usage of fuel blocks. And now they're changing the recipe for fuel blocks so that they can use more liquid ozone. So they're doing lots of changes. We haven't seen this demand for fuel blocks evaporate. We still have the demand for fuel blocks in pretty much everything we do now.
Well, I imagine they looked at the balance and said we need to waste more of these minerals because the prices have been falling and falling and falling for all the ice mining materials. So who are the winners and losers here? Let's start with the winners. Who's actually gaining from this change?
As Carnell said, it's mainly the industrialists and the miners first and foremost, but that's pretty much the intention, to create a more stable economy and a better balance of overheads on everything in the game. So it's not this extremely easy mode that we've been developing towards from 2007 until now.
I'm going to point out another winner. The folks who have set up PvP caches of dreads and other valuable PvP ships all around the New Eden. Those people are also winners, because now they don't need to move via jump fuel. They can go to each of their caches via interceptors or via wormholes. In fact, if CCP's intention for this were to, let's say, reduce the likelihood for large organizations to project capital force a long distance, they would have wanted to nerf travel by wormholes or nerf interceptors, not fuel.
Yeah.
And in general, it's an attempt, if I'm not mistaken. I think the whole design crew, and especially the new Economic Council in CCP, is trying to figure out how to combat this creep that the economy has been having for almost the last 10 years. There's simply not enough balancing destruction. So we've just been accumulating. Pretty much everything is overproduced, right? So if you want to take some of that out, you basically need to put a sink of sorts into the game. You have to have some more destruction. You have to have some more overheads. Otherwise, it's just not going to be balanced, because it's just going to be titans in space, right?
Well, we're all biased, and our preferred way of taking stuff out of the game is destruction in combat.
Yeah, and that's fine. It's just that if it's never going to be a real cost, if you're always able to recoup that and more in the same time frame, it's not really a loss, right? It's not really destruction.
Well, okay, so the harvesters of ice they've just had their product go up in value because there's going to be twice the demand pool on it. So they're winners. People who already moved, so they don't have to worry about this change, are also winners, as Carnero said. And if they have caches of big capital ships that need to jump, they don't need to get there. So that's good for them. Are there any other winners in this?
I think everyone is going to end up being winners, because it's going to matter more what you feel, what you own, and how you conduct yourself in EVE.
No,
I disagree completely. I think we'll see no change to the way capital is used in EVE because of the fuel block, because of the isotopes. Nobody who flies capital fleets cares about the cost of their fuel.
Yeah,
and usually on these big capital, well, at least on our side, usually it's not the pilot that pays for it either. It's the alliance that pays for the fuel for them to
Yep.
move around.
That's right too.
Yeah. So then the losers are, as Dunk has been saying, and it looks like chat is agreeing with him with people. Let's see who was there. People Burlington and other people agreed with you too, but that's who I found. Who are the losers in this scenario? Who's like getting screwed?
It's not really a loser, I wouldn't say. I mean, they're doing a good change, which I think they're adding the liquid ozone in as an ingredient to making fuel blocks. And if you watch this stuff, there's just a glut of liquid ozone. It's basically worthless everywhere. And so that's a good change, because with jump bridges eventually going away, that's the only major use of them anywhere. So that's good. They're thinking ahead on that. But it just, again, I don't like when the parts of Eve that are like that can take a lot of time, logistics, fueling things, making fuel blocks, hauling things around. There's only a few people in Eve that do that a lot, and those people are the one that are getting impact on it, and they already had a job that was kind of not as fun as jumping your Phoenix in or jumping your Super in.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what they're expecting the funness of gameplay to be when they're making the hard work harder.
Hopefully they're bringing it back to old style Eve, where these things matter and where you have the unique selling point of an economy and an ecosystem in the game that's balanced. Because we've seen it go way far from the industrial groups and the miners and the people that organize to basically just PvP in space.
And that is an interesting point that you can really only see over a long, long period of time. That when we speak in terms of Eve, it's always about the PvP. The fun part of Eve is the PvP. Everything you do is just kind of earning money so that you can PvP. And it seems to me that this isn't a sink. And what I mean by sink is money leaving the game as opposed to coming in as a faucet. For those that don't know that concept. And this is
point is
putting
that there
money
is no
in the
industry,
pockets
right?
of other.
There's no
Hold on a
competition
second.
left.
Hold on a second. This is putting money in the pockets of another player. This isn't money that's being paid out in some ethereal tax or something. Go ahead, Caleb.
Well, the point is that in the past, you used to actually worry about losing your shit. You don't do that anymore. There used to be room for market shares in industry, in mining, but it's all just been made so easy and overproductive. So pretty much all industrialists, all serious logistic people, there's no earnings anymore. There's no fun in their gameplay because it's been taken away by bad balance. They fucked off. They don't play anymore. I know a few people, very old school players, that don't play at all because none of this is in the game anymore. You can't really have fun being an industrialist or a miner because it's basically Rorquals for everyone and Titans for everyone. It's not fun anymore. And it's that balance that needs to go back to the way it was in the past when the game was growing, because there was room for new players to come in. There is no room for new players if there is no growth, if there is no consumption, if there is no need. Everyone can just be serviced by a one-man multi-boxing fleet in Delve, right?
I don't disagree with you, but I don't think that the solution they're putting forth helps in that. I think if they want to make gameplay and industry better, they could do things like if you fail a T2 invention, you get a meta blueprint. I mean, there's other things they can do that add some spice to it instead of just making it HTFU. I mean, I agree with you. Industry can be more fun and more things to do. I don't know that these changes are achieving the goal you're talking about.
It's about bringing scarcity back, and they can do this in many ways. And I agree that this is not the optimal way. There's a lot of ways that could have been much more involving and engaging. Things like rebalancing and fixing the blueprint designs would have been a lot better. Removing things like industry index, which is stupid. There's so many things that they can do, but I'm saying this is like a gradual move. And if there is success in this and we get some scarcity back, so some meaning to actually playing the game back, then you might see some of the players coming back that actually used to find this fun. And this is really about, it's a sandbox game. I'm not going to directly compare it to Farmville or something like that. But the point is that the people that like to do those kind of things, call it the Care Bears, these people have left because there is nothing left for them, because the organizations as they are have so low level of requirements on labor. So a few people can basically supply all of Delve with all the minerals and all the mining stuff that, well, in the past. This is going away hopefully that's
No,
going to bring
no.
back some players.
That MBR that you looked at, that's not a few people doing that. That's a lot of people doing all that mining activity and industrial activity in Delft.
You know what I mean? I'm saying that it was unheard of 5 years ago that anyone would solo mine their own titans. This is the standard today.
Well, as far as the losers, we were covering who was winning and who was losing on this, and it's good for the game as a whole. I think everybody kind of agrees that something has to happen to kind of make things more scarce, because scarce brings value to things, because people fight over scarce things. The other group that might be hurt by this, I think, is the people who are further from the trade hubs. And maybe this changes. Maybe the nature of trade hubs changes from one hub supplying a couple of sub hubs and those supplying the empires that exist out in outlaw space. But people who live really far away from those hubs are going to have to pay twice as much to transport things back and forth. So
Which
they're
is the whole point, right? You
profit
see
margins gonna
people like the big arbitrage traders. They fucked off because there's no hubs anymore. It's not valid to have that business running, and this is because of the game design. We need to get back to where it's worth it to actually ship things around, where there is a balance of payment between regions and between constellations. Without this, there is no unique selling point of EVE. I can just go and play World of Warcraft.
Well, you can see how tough the balance is. We have two people in comments here. A director one com industry is super tough. I've been playing less than a year and I can't make a decent profit in null. And then Ukulu says the opposite. It's the opposite. I think industry is so easy that it's super easy and everyone is doing it.
Yeah, that's the point.
Not super
people
insightful,
can supply it. That means there's no room for competition. You can't get into these businesses because it's already supplied, and there is not enough loss to take out the overproduction from industrialists. And this is because of design flaws from CCP. Things like the time to actually produce things, the fact that everything has been designed around multi-boxing or multi-accounting, so you can just add more and more accounts. And then if you are in the higher tiers with the higher skills, you don't really need to think about it. You just produce for your local things. And then the whole internalized markets where everything is handled on contracts internally. There's no benefit from doing it externally in a free market. So they've basically undermined the whole unique selling point of EVE.
So just to give you guys a perspective on this, I hope this wasn't already said, but I was muted for the last 5 minutes because I had to fire a moon laser. But for example, there's one guy in NC Dot that basically does all the building. Like it's one dude. He has such a huge amount of ISK. He has such a he's so set up already, because he has all the research BPOs and stuff that he can just copy. He's basically supplying NC Dot on its own. And if you would want to build for example, you recruit a bunch of people and one of those people decides, hey, I want to build for NC Dot as well, right? He has to compete with that guy. And it's basically impossible for him to compete because he doesn't have any research, like getting into industry, right? You don't have any research BPOs. You end up having to buy the research BPCs. All these things will, just add 100 mil here, 100 mil there, and you'll basically have to sell your stuff for more money than the other guy already. That's already been researching his BPCs for years and years and whatever. Or BPOs.
Yeah, and that guy's probably so wealthy he's not even trying to make a big profit. He's just trying to keep NC happy with lower prices.
Yeah, I mean he's still making a good profit, but he's selling his caps for the cheapest I've ever seen. Like he's selling a Rorqual for 2 billion per hull, and I know okay, granted I've bought all my Rorquals so far on public market and they go for 2.4 bill. I'm not sure what goons sell Rorquals for internally, but basically he sells them for 2 bill, and that seems like a really solid price to me. So yeah, it's really hard to compete in industry.
Big producers have a huge advantage. This is always the case, isn't it, you guys? That the
2.02 billion in 1DQ.
2.0 to 2.2.
2.02 billion.
Okay, so basically 2 point. Okay, I saw.
Well, I know in the Imperium that the byproducts of ice mining had fallen so low that they were negligible. They were 20 ISK per isotope, which is ridiculous. That's free, because there's usually about 200 or a bit more. So there's just like these are basically byproducts now. So they have more value since they're being injected into different processes, which again will drive demand up. So it seems like they're shoring up fuel, which was damaged by the transitions from structures, because we went from player-owned star bases to citadels and engineering complexes and stuff. And that transition changed the way fuel works for these things and left fuels out pretty much, because they don't need to be fueled. Only their services need to be fueled to start with. And now you have all these pauses that are basically starting to come offline. So it seems like they needed to absorb up all that byproduct, all that fuel. Like they needed to do this. Okay, so it's not elegant because it looks like it hurts the middle guy again, the middle class of Eve, and the rich guys all have their fuel subsidized, so they don't care. This is not a big deal to them. But I think the big groups hurt too. Like, to buy millions and millions in fuel is not an empty cost. They do have to pay it.
Yeah, but it's really not since they reduced the jump ranges so much with Phoebe, fuel cost just isn't a big deal anymore. I remember back in the day before Phoebe and shit, PL had like monthly fuel cost of a couple $100 in the bot days. Shadu did show the fuel cost that they used in I think it was 2012 or something on his presentation he did at FanFest 2013.
I remember that.
So it was like a couple $100. Right now it's literally almost nothing compared to that, because you just don't jump as much. Like even with the double cost on regular caps, like Dunk said, nobody is gonna give a fuck, because you use like maybe 10-15k fuel for like wherever you go to combat, right? Because you only jump once, twice, maybe a third time if it's like an emergency. You maybe use like 30k fuel, and that's like I'm not actually sure how much. It's probably like 50 million is like whatever, dude. 50 million is nobody cares about.
You'll spend more in cap boosters than you will in fuel.
Yeah.
So this won't change anything for them, pretty much.
And the only people that I saw that were really upset about this were Jump Freighter pilots. But I think Jump Freighter pilots can just offload it. Like they can just offload the costs to their customers. So whatever.
Yeah. Well, there was also a bit of, I call it capitulation, but other people can call it CCP listening to feedback. They actually made an adjustment for jump freighters, giving them even more space in their hold so they can carry even more fuel.
See, actually, I don't think that's listening at all. I think they had that prepared because they knew that the outrage was going to be big. So they had like option 1, option 2, option 3, depending on how big the outcry was. They had that already set. Like, I don't think they listened to the community. They just said like, okay, look, everybody's crying. Let's give them this.
Yeah, actually, if they don't do that, they should. That's a really good idea, is to put forward.
But it's possibly true.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's the smart thing, is you always have something to give if you need to soften it. It's what they did when Phoebe hit, right? Like Rorquals and jump freighters themselves were super restricted, just like all ships were going to jump only 5 light years, which would have really impacted logistics, because they would have had to jump twice as much to get supplies to their remote areas. And they totally pulled that back and said, okay, we'll make an exception for freighters. And later they pulled it back and said, let's make an exception for Rorquals too, right? So these are like secondary positions. All right.
And as a result, we have not seen huge marauding gangs of evil jump freighters and Rorquals jumping all around the galaxy causing havoc.
No, but what you've seen is the same centralized marketplace model not change, because what you assume would happen is that people would become a lot more local. And I thought it was bold.
Well, no, I think they talked about that, and at several FanFests in Vegas, we've tried to talk to the devs about this. Is if they want local production, you have to be able to produce locally, and they're not willing to do that right now. What they want to do right now is make there be interregional trade, that you can't get out of the moon or all the pieces you need to build T2 ships. So
which is exactly what we need, because that's
well,
old
you can,
school
you
Eve.
can, yeah, you can say
we basically had the CSM that Mina was on, where everyone basically got free raw materials in their local space, and it's been undermining the whole economy of Eve since then.
I get it, but if the goal is you want local production, if that's the goal, that by separating the materials people aren't going to fly from the north to the south with materials. They're going to go to Jeddah or Amar and drop them off and sell them on the market. So you're still hauling in and out of hubs all the time. And then you look at, well, what's most cost effective? Hauling materials in and out of null, or hauling assembled stuff built in HiSec at lower risk, so lower prices. And so the effect of doing this is you still have the same thing where finished T2 products are hauled out of HiSec into nullsec, and you're building very few things except things you can only build in nullsec. So
But that's
nothing
your
has
choice.
changed.
You
No,
can
it's not
do
choice.
the cycle thing
Supply and
around
demand.
the blue donut. It's there's no need to go central to Jeddah. You can trade with your neighbor. This is the whole intention. You need to have balance of trade, or there is nothing unique about Eve anymore.
Well, let's not
So
put
how,
two
so how
dynamics
do you
into
how
this.
do you how do you envision that happening? That we're going to
Well,
strike
because
a trade
if-
agreement
if-
with Goons or NC? That we're going to
Yes.
start trading moon goo
Not-
material back
not
and
with,
forth?
not with your enemy, with your collaborators, with the people you're blue to. So you get the whole, instead of this into Jeddah and out that everyone is doing, you will get
No,
a
but the
cycling of
groups-
stuff around in the null section, right? That's the intention. You need to trade with your neighbors.
I understand the intention, but the game changes do not support that. What the game
Yes, it
changes
does. With
support
structures, it
is
does.
it reinforces bring everything to Jeddah, make it in HiSec, and then pull it back out to nullsec. That's what
No,
the
'cause
gameplay
it's safer
changes.
it's safer to trade with your nullsec neighbors if you're blue. It's a lot safer.
What? You're not encouraging more blue donut, are you, Caleb?
No, but maybe I'm
Are you
encouraging
picturing-
things like subtle deals, underhand deals, shady deals with your neighbor, and
Am I
handing
supposed to
over-
load up a ship in Delve full of interesting stuff and then fly into Fountain and go find someone to trade it with? Is that what I'm supposed to do?
Well, eventually in Delve and in Goon Space, it's just going to be creating all these secondary and tertiary hubs, and then there will be supply moving between all these, and maybe even the fixed price thing. That's very Russian, but I'm pretty sure that Delve will be unique. But I'm saying that the entities will trade with each other when there is peace, and then they will attack and aggress when there's not. Raw materials will be the things that we fight for, and that's the whole intention. This is what we've been needing for a long time. We have had nothing to fight for except for LOL and meta drama.
Well, I know there's the feeling of wanting to make civilization, because that's what Eve is. It's like a very ambitious simulator for civilization. But without courts of law and consequences for breaking contracts, you don't really get there, right? Because if you're dealing with your friends, then that's a small group of people affected. If you're dealing with a stranger, you need to have some kind of trust. And there is, you can put a certain amount of money on a transaction as insurance and that sort of thing, which is kind of minor. But most of the time, you're kind of just having to trust somebody you don't know. And then this place totally celebrates when people rip other people off. Like, that's always a great thing. And it's not, because you're killing the fabric of trust that would make the game more interesting and more complicated in this way. So I don't know if you're going to get to that utopia where you have trade routes and you have treaties and trade like people say, I require this many of that material from that land
Of course
over
we
there.
will. It's what we had in the past. We had dealings like that in the meta markets. We had a meta in the economy. It's gone away since 2007-8. It's just been undermined.
How-
There's no need to do dealings like that. It's all dependent on the nation states. It's no longer on the capitalists. So to
I'm
speak.
sure that was designed out because people didn't want to do that anymore. Why didn't they want to do that anymore?
No, it wasn't. It was designed and decided by CCP. It had nothing to do with what the players were doing or wanting to do. They have been nerfing what I'd call meta markets and meta economy since 2008. Well, it started a bit earlier than that when they basically killed a lot of unique businesses. But the point is that all these things that you talk about, they arise naturally when there is an incentive. But the
Unique
incentive was
businesses
undermined.
Like the Eve Bank or the Titans for You.
Yes, exactly
these are
like
both-
that, and like
these-
the BSAC stock exchange, like collateralized debt.
How many
all
of
these
those
things.
ended in crime?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because in the case of eBank, it was one guy that basically found out that there was a way to actually run away with everything. That's siphoning and stealing. That's corp theft. the actual organization would have worked perfectly if there hadn't been that risk. And that risk is basically a CCP design, because they have never finished working out how shares are supposed to work and how voting systems
But
work.
of all those interesting models, how many of them ended in crime? What's the percentage, or how many out of how many?
Well, maybe I'd say maybe 50-60% ended in crime, but you have to account for things like Ponzi schemes are funny because they usually start out as a good intention business, but then when things change and they start having less success, burnout will then lead to them actually deciding to do a Ponzi instead.
My question is then, who killed that gameplay?
CCP.
Was it CCP or the players?
CCP and the Council of Stellar Management, when they insisted on things like self-dependency and sufficiency, where you don't need to trade with anyone and where you can mine your own Titan. That's where we are today.
Yeah. Well,
let me tell you, I do industry, not at a super serious level, but just to make interceptors locally, just interceptors. Forget about making Titans and all that kind of stuff. The Moongoo system as it is still requires me to haul stuff in from HiSec.
You're not supposed to be able to do it by yourself.
So you shouldn't be able to build a single T2 ship without making an agreement with my enemies.
Yes, you yourself can build one and source all that and create all that. But if you want to build an entire doctrine, you can't. You need to trade. You need to outsource some of the work because it's not going to be worth it. You're going to have to focus your opportunity cost. This is what's been killed.
Exactly. So my opportunity cost right now, the most rational economic choice for me to do is to go to JITA and get what I need and bring it back to NullSec.
No, not at all. In an ideal world where
that is absolutely the case. That is absolutely the case today, and every industrialist in EVE is going to agree with me.
You're right, Dunk, but let him respond to that.
You need to source some of the things that you are lacking. Your bottlenecks you need to outsource. That means that you do need to have some imports from JITA, but you will have something that you have in excess, and that's what's supposed to go to JITA, or better yet, if you can get a better price with your neighbor that you're Bluetooth just now. This is what the unique design was in EVE in the old days. And it was not perfect, of course, but it's been undermined and totally killed over the last 8 years.
If that's what they really intended.
I just don't see Carneros, let Carneros talk.
If that's what they really intended, they should have put some UI in for that, because there is no UI for that. Go to your neighbor and borrow a cup of sugar. That doesn't exist in the UI. Let me contrast that for a moment with the changes they're making with these new daily alpha injectors. I know we're not supposed to talk about that yet. It's probably later in the program. But they put some thought into the user interface on that. Instead of making you take a pill and over the course of a day, it would give you these skills. No, they gave it to you all at once so you could conveniently, you can only do it once per day, but they'd let you conveniently inject it and apply it all in one package for a better user experience for a brand new player. If they're going to apply that kind of UX approach, why wouldn't they have applied it to this design also? I don't think what you're describing, Caleb, was in the minds of the designers.
Well, it was initially. It's just that it's not been given the same attention and upgrades and improvements as everything else in the game, because the market and the contract system has pretty much been in the same state as it is now since 2004-5-ish, right? And all the things you need to be able to have proper and serious trade and shipping has been in the game. It's just we have not gotten the upgrades to those systems because it is a niche, but it's a niche that is creating the whole ecosystem, and that's what what's killed all these things is the lack of attention to the fact that the unique selling point of EVE is that it's an ecosystem economy simulator.
Well, I think the thing that killed that kind of gameplay is the lack of accountability for people that run away with the bank.
No. That's also emergent gameplay. It arises just like diplomacy. You're asking for the same. You're doing the same thing that half of the market guys do. They ask for some oversight by CCP and protection. It's not needed. We never needed it. What is needed is tools that make it easier for players to create these things themselves.
I have a suggestion for CCP. Instead of me fat fingering an extra zero and losing all my money, that there is some kind of breaks that stop that sort of
It
thing.
doesn't exist in real life. Why would you want it in Eve? Fat fingering is a fact in the real markets. Why would you want that protection from CCP in this game?
Well, I disagree that that's the case. But even in that case,
But
CCP
you can
has
disagree
said,
as much as you like. You can go and search for it. Several companies have gone bankrupt because of a trader and a broker going fat finger.
well, when I go to the market and when I'm buying a simple transaction, not when I'm investing, in stocks or whatever, there are more safeguards than, oops, I accidentally paid you too much. Can I get that change back? No, you can't. You already gave it to me. That doesn't happen in real life when you go to the market. But in the game, even there, they did put something that said you're going to pay a lot more than you should because of the regional average is this, and you're paying 100% of that region, 200% of that regional average. There is breaks that stop you. That's just the only.
You need to have information. You don't need protection. You need to know that the market graphs are correct. You know that you need to have proper player activity of the markets to counter any abuse. You don't need CCP to protect you. It's a mistake.
Okay. Going back to Dunk's point, I'll let him have a little more time here. The reality is that people need to go to JITA to get their things done. And this fits into this broader topic because what we're seeing is maybe making it more difficult to go to JITA to get things done, which means more local trade hubs will flourish. And maybe, as Caleb is saying, trade agreements between certain areas. Dunk, did you want to say anything else on that? Because you're talking about the reality of what gameplay is right now.
I think that what Caleb is talking about, I think exists in a lot of ways. He may not agree with it, but if you're within a coalition, those industry people in the coalition are discussing, do you have this ore? Do you have that? Can I borrow some of this? There is that going on. It doesn't go outside your coalition, and I wouldn't expect it to go outside your coalition. Maybe other groups do it differently. But right now, as a light industrialist, or for any of the starting players that want to get into light industry doing stuff, the system is complex, and the materials to make what they need still require you to basically haul stuff in from JITA, making that the goal of building local cannot be achieved right now. So I would prefer to build everything local. I'd love to make all the ships locally and have that capability. But right now, the optimal economic choice still remains haul it in from HiSec. So I would love to build more locally. I build a ton locally, but the game changes are not supporting that. So these changes aren't supporting that.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay. I think anything that makes something harder discourages it. Anything that makes something easier encourages it.
Well, again,
the
facts are, if you literally can't get the things to build locally, if you can't get them without bringing them in, you can't achieve no matter what external pressure is to get you to build it. If you don't have the silicates, you can't build it. If you don't have the technetium, you can't build it. And so if you can't get it, no matter what pressure they put on you, no matter how expensive they make it, it doesn't like make it pop out of thin air. And that's the thing that industrialists talk about, is region locks create a problem, right? And the solution that they want is go to JITA. Or not, I shouldn't say want. The solution that's happening is go to JITA, go to Amarr.
The solution of least resistance.
Is what they really want just for people to be flying around and loot pinatas? Is that what they want?
But no one's flying in a loot pinata. I think they want trade and they want local production, but it's hard to have it both ways.
All right. This is very interesting because I think it's on the surface, it's a fuel change, which is going to make some people hurt a bit more. But under it is the current of what's the game design going towards? Do you want to make civilization, or is this just supposed to be about every man for themselves? And I think that's a much deeper and broader question. I think Caleb constantly goes back to the roots of Eve and is looking at those kinds of models and which way the rules are changing for the behavior to change to make it more like a civilization simulator, which is the interesting part of Eve for some of us. I think it is myself.
Well, they've tried everything else to get the growth numbers back. The only thing they've not tried is to make Eve hard like it was in the old days.
All right, growth numbers. Let's actually move topics over to the new injectors that are specifically for I think we can say these are specifically for new players.
They
They're
are.
for alpha players.
I w-
Carneros?
Let me see a couple words about that too. There have been times in the past in EVE Online where it would look to the outside players, it would look to the players like CCP was not putting a lot of attention into the new player experience and how to improve that. There were large periods of time where it stayed exactly the same and nothing new was introduced there. But I feel like CCP hasn't been like that for a while now. They've been trying to keep improving the new player experience, balancing it, adding more on, thinking about it. And this is, I think, another example of that. They added the alpha thing. They evaluated the first set of results, and they're looking for the pain points in that experience and where people are dissatisfied or dropping out. And one of them happens to be that they want to be able to do something in the game that they can't do yet, but they're close to being able to do it. So CCP's trying a thing here with these daily alpha injectors. It's, you have to tip your hat to them for even trying. And they've got their heart in the right place, and they are thinking about the UI at the same time that they're thinking about the functionality. So I appreciate all these things.
I think it's important to mention that this new feature is not SP out of thin air. It's very much the opposite. It's exactly the same as a Plex. It's just on a per day basis. You're getting the same SP into the game per dollar, per time. There is nothing out of thin air at all. It's exactly the same as everything else.
Let's go over what this change looks like. And it's on screen now, if you can see it. Can somebody describe the nature of this new injector?
It's blue.
It's blue. I'm thinking it's round.
Isn't blue a nasty word in today's EVE?
It is. Although for all those people that have been to EVE meets, you get served blue frosting on donuts at these EVE meets. So I guess it's not that nasty a word because they do serve it at EVE meets. So this new injector is pretty much for how does it work? It's pretty much for how does it limited to alpha characters?
Well, any character that's an alpha can basically buy one of these, inject it, and then they have to wait 24 hours to inject another one. So it's pretty much a 30th of a Plex, and you're basically paying retroactively. So you're basically getting your SP when you can afford to buy it instead of buying a Plex.
And these things are going to cost about how much?
20% more than a Plex, give or take.
Okay, then one Plex.
Well, if you're Plexing your account, this is 20% more expensive if you're doing it on a daily basis.
All right, let's
And
have
likewise,
it.
And likewise, that 10 or 20% more expensive also describes the cost premium for paying by Plex over paying by credit card. Currency triage aside.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's 500 Plex if you're doing it in the monthly way, and it's 600 Plex if you're doing it on a daily basis.
Okay, I'm a little bit dense on this issue, but basically it's going to cost a new player how much to get one of these things per day?
20 of the new Plex per day.
Okay, and give me
60 million.
price
60 million.
Thank you. 60 million. 60 million per injector once a day. How many new players can afford 60 million per day?
Not a lot, but eventually they will get there. If they've played for like 3 weeks, they should get into the range of being able to generate that amount.
All right, maybe it's my experience, but I didn't get anywhere near 60 million for months and months and months, if not years. I was running missions and doing pedestrian things in EVE was only ever earning me maybe 3 to 7 million a week kind of thing. If you're playing it slow, if you're just playing the game, right? I mean, how fast do these young guys recruit, and why is this even appealing to them? Are people going to buy it for them? Because these are going to be on the market. Or is it a way for old players to come back and get situated quicker? because they already have all this cash.
It's only designed for brand new players. It's got no value for anything else in the game. Anyone that's played more than 2 months will not have any utility of this new feature.
So it's for brand new characters.
Here's how I see it. If you have a good weekend, maybe and tagging along, and you make some ISK with some other folks, you might be able to reward yourself with one. You're not going to buy them every day. Just because they have a 24-hour cooldown doesn't mean the intended methodology is for you to buy one every day. I also think that if you've got wealthy friends who are in the game, and by definition, anyone who survived the transition to being a full-time player in EVE is wealthy compared to a brand new player coming in. They can afford to, buy one or two and just give them to their friends. It's also Secret Santa season, I'll just say. If you end up pulling a newbie name, give them some of these.
Well, okay. I guess I took it a little differently of what this was for. I kind of think there's that gap between the 5 million cap and the 5 million free train by just normal traditional EVE skill training, and then the 20 million alpha cap, and that these things were to address people who need a little burst of SP when they're in that zone, when they can't just train over time. Am I getting that wrong?
You're not getting any boost in speed on training at all from this feature. It's exactly as fast as normal Plex or normal account.
No. What I'm saying is, don't they cap? You don't train for free when you hit 5 million SP. That if you want to be an alpha, you can go up to 20 million SP, but you don't train for free once you get past 5 million.
Yeah, that too. That's part of the design too. This is for the people between 5 million and 20 million. So that if they've stopped their free training, they can get a little bit more and still be an alpha.
Right. So if you want to skill your way into battleships or whatever, you could over time be buying these things and popping them in. And somehow the 24-hour thing is to avoid some whatever manipulation that I haven't figured out. But that's how I took it.
It's to avoid that you're not getting SP into the game faster than by normal Plex training.
Right. So that's where I see the usage was, is the person, they're at 7 million SP. They're still an alpha. They don't want to pay this monthly subscription fee, but they want to unlock something, a skill level higher in the game. They buy one of these things for 60 million. That at 7 million SP, you're probably able to generate that without a lot of, endless time. That's how I took it. But
it's exactly that. It's you can do it in a granular way. You don't need to get a full month's Plex if you're just aiming for this small goal that's not a full month.
Okay, so there is something that Unreal Dagger here said, and you guys expressed the same thing. He says the injectors aren't for day one newbies. These are for the only way for players to get from 5 million to 20 million for free still. So this is the free avenue to get to 20 million, right? Everything else is a paid.
Free. It's not free in any way.
Sorry, these things, they're not dropping as loot or anything, right?
So no. They're only bought from the store or from the market, or you can convert them with Plex, right?
By free, he's just saying that you can get it through gameplay buying and through gameplay buying Plex on the market.
Well, the thing is, you could always buy gameplay by Plex. You could always buy gameplay by injectors. I don't understand why they need a new, smaller injector just for this segment of population, 20 million and under.
Well, it potentially cools the demand for existing Plex.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like if you're 5 million, is this just more granular? Because they already have.
It's more granularity mainly. The impact is going to be extremely small because there should be a utility impact on Plex of maybe 2 to 4%. With this, that's my estimate, but it's not going to be felt because the speculation on Plex is too high. So that's going to make up for that change.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand this change myself now that I think about it, because you have injectors, and then you have injectors that are 1/5 the size of a normal injector. And now you have this even smaller injector that is capped at 20 million. You're past 20 million, you can't use it. So
yeah, but let's call it a smaller Plex, really, because that's really what it is, and that's what the CSM was discussing what to call it, and they ended up with calling it an injector. I think it's in the dev blog about it that the naming of it is a little bit off because it is actually just a mini Plex.
Okay. Well, somebody says this is a bad sign for the game. No, it's not. It seems to me that what CCP has been trying to do for a long time, and this is what Carneros was talking about, is get a new players into the game. That's how Eve does well. The more people there are in the game playing, the healthier it feels when you're moving around and seeing things happen. The more transactions between strangers, the better. The more invigorating the game becomes. If you're flying around and there's nobody around, it's very depressing.
They didn't build this feature in to make money. There's no
Yeah.
sales target associated with it for their guys to achieve. No, it's not that kind of thing.
Yeah, this
No,
looks
it's just
like,
maybe to incentivize players that are new to stay a little longer. I think that's the best solution.
Right.
Really.
So these kinds of changes are built for player retention early on. That's how we see them. Is it a sign that Eve's in trouble? No. It's just a sign that CCP wants better player retention. That's something they've wanted since 2004, I'm sure. Because in
You
order
mean
for it,
2008? They had plenty of retention and growth up till then.
and that's interesting. Why did that change? The game
I think I
skyrocketed
covered that 15 minutes ago.
because the economy tanked, right? Or the economy mechanics.
There was there was no interdependence anymore. The people that were playing Eve were not dependent on new blood.
Well, okay. I
But
think there was.
if the value of a new player's labor and time is too low because his skill points isn't worth anything, his labor hours isn't worth anything, the only thing that you need him for is as a meat shield.
Well,
And this is if you go back, that's exactly when the new player groups came in, Karma Fleet and all that. That's
Well,
all
you
what
need 'em-
came out of exactly that era.
you need them for company. You need them for their humor. You need them for their.
Yeah, but aside from company, they're worth nothing.
I'll tell you, in the Imperium, new players with low skills are not looked at as meat shields at all. They are
No.
looked
But
at
the
as valuable.
valuation of how you utilize new players came with things like Karma Fleet, right? That's when you started seeing these blob new groups. Before that, they weren't.
or brave.
You were expecting them to transition up the ladder and become valuable, and that was really bad for player retention.
So what you're saying is that Brave saved Eve.
Yes, pretty much.
We knew that, right?
The new player experience that brought was basically what saved it and made sure that it didn't collapse.
Okay, Caleb. If that's the case, they came in doing no industry. They just wanted to fight, and that's
Yeah, because
opposite of
there was no
it.
value in the industry. They had no value in anything except for fighting.
Yeah. Well, if we did nothing else today, we figured out that Brave saved Eve, and that's something that everybody knew anyway. So thanks, Brave. All right. So is there anything else that we wanted to cover that, there is something new, and this is kind of funny. We'll be seeing a lot more of this, but it looks like wiped out a mining fleet about 5 minutes ago in Dudreda, which is in Metropolis. So that's kind of interesting. So watch out, mining fleets. These moon minerals are not free. It might take a group, but it also takes a little bit of protection or at least some sneaking around. All right. So thanks, guys. Is there any other topics that we wanted to hit before we take off? I like how this show ends because we end up coming to the conclusion that Brave saved the game.
Well, I just want to say, for all the talk that there has been about the Blue Donut and it's tough to get fights and all that stuff, it seems like there's fighting all over the place. People are moving fleets around all the time. People are roaming around, shooting the hell out of each other all over the place these days. Now, maybe our part of Eve is just the active part, but man, it sure seems there's a lot of fights, people dropping caps, doing stupid things, doing smart things, imps roaming around in impasse. I mean, it seems pretty crazy these days, but I don't know. If other people aren't seeing that.
I'll give an example too. During this show, Fraternity, the Chinese alliance that we won't say who they're allied with in the game, they snuck into Delve in capsules, formed up and equipped themselves locally with Tempests, and undocked in Delve in a Tempest fleet. And,
to kill the local residents or to?
I don't know. I didn't jump into the fleet because I'm here with you guys and talking in stations, but Sounded interesting. There's
Stuff's going on. Right, Killer B, are you still there?
Yes, I did. I'm actually still here. I did listen very interested while I'm mining this moon. So
That's right. So we have one of the great FCs of our day kicking back and enjoying a mining fleet.
oh yeah, dude, best way of making money in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that can't be understated. That there is still, like, for all the things that all the boxes we want to put Eve into, you do have like PvPers who do industry and harvesting. Not to mention the wormholers who are constantly doing both. So there's a huge amount of diversity. So we'll see if this attempt to give people an avenue to get to 20 million skill points as a new player is gonna help out keeping newer blood around as well. Oh, by the way, anybody know anyone that's taken off because of these jump changes or the fuel changes?
No, the
I know
fatigue
one.
change is the most useless change they ever made. Like it's just another example of how they don't understand what the issue is that people complain about. The max fatigue literally doesn't matter. It
Right.
literally doesn't matter.
Right.
So that was
It's with
that was pretty funny to watch.
It was kind of a maybe this will make you happy distraction. But the one thing that was said that people don't talk about often is the secondary part of that, which was a promise, maybe not a promise, but they were going to change the way. They didn't like jump fatigue, and they were going to change it. They want to change it. What do you
Yeah.
think? Is that an empty promise, or is that a sign of something to come?
No, but it's gonna take a long time, which is fine by me. Like that's why there's a lot of doom and gloom, I guess you call them, people running around right now that are like, oh my god, Eve is dead. You know, in my time since I started playing, I think I've had this Eve is dead thing for like 4 times now or something. And I don't really jump on that train anymore. I think that the general direction is good. The main issue with CCP is that they just don't have enough dev power to get all the changes done they want to get done. And we'll see how that changes if CCP actually maybe gets bought up by somebody or they do some drastic changes or something like that. Who knows?
Well, at
Wait.
some point they're going to finish these structures, right? Because right now, I think a lot of dev power is being focused on the structures
All of
and
it.
getting them done.
Yeah, all of it.
Almost,
I mean,
almost all of it.
all the game, like the actual game developers that do. I mean, obviously, it's the team that CCP Kaku is, and they mostly do like quality of life stuff.
Mhm.
But like all the like actual game mechanics, sort of dev power is in structures. So
Right, but at some point they're going to finish that because we're already 3 structures deep into how many do we have to go? It changes, but I think it's 2 or 3 more, right?
yeah, I mean that really depends on what they want to do, but yeah, hopefully a couple more, and then
Well, they want
Yeah.
gates. They still need to do gates, and they also still need to do. I think they still need to do communication towers if they're still going to do those.
I
or
don't think they'll do
administra-
gates. Like I think it would be a bad move to do gates before they do like the tweaks to jump and off because the gate thing is way more sensitive than anything they've implemented so far. And
Yeah.
I think that needs to be done very carefully. And I think they should take their time to do the gates. And I think the
Well, it is
time
their
that they
last
need to
one.
take, but the time they need to take to put those gates in, I think they should make sure that the players still playing the game have fun doing it. So I think they should, maybe bring out, I don't know what's next on the schedule. I think we're pretty set on structures. Whatever, like they should figure out what to do with Sino beacons and stuff. Then they should roll out pauses. They should roll out stations, and then they should focus on fatigue, Zoff, and then they can go back to structures when the game is actually like quote unquote playable. I think it's playable, but that's because we try to avoid these Zoff mechanics as much as we can and kind of play our way around it.
Well,
Not
Bardgus
really
says
embrace
it here. Observation towers were one of the things they said, and that may help with the cloaky campers that people complain about or don't know what to do. But the point is, there's observation towers. There is administrative. I think they changed administrative and put that into citadels. If I'm not mistaken, they combined markets and administrative together to create citadels. So maybe that's gone off the list. But that would leave at least 2 items that they need to do. And let's say they take 6 months for each one, and let's say maybe Gates goes longer. What we're seeing is in a year and a half or so, or 2 years, that they will largely be finishing up. And at the same time, they're developing this PvE strand where you see more and more hardcore PvE opportunities coming out. So who knows where that all leads to? All right. I think we're done, unless there's something else you guys wanted to discuss. No?
I just wanted to bring up that in the past, I predicted that the changes they were doing to Macarials would not make people not fly Macarials. And I think that holds true, that Macarials and Loki's online is what we have these days.
Oh,
Except
I thought
Loki's actually pretty garbage.
but
that's what you
Macarials
see.
are,
That's what you see all the time.
well, maybe they're old stocks because Macarials are running out of, I mean, they're actually falling in price, aren't they?
But we don't have the stats for the balanced thing that's supposed to be coming out with the new alpha things.
We talked about that in the Blue Donut today, actually, and I think that CCP is going to approach this the wrong way again. Besides some stuff with the Citadel void bomb mechanics and stuff, the issue with the Macarial isn't necessarily, or the issue also, personally, a ship that I have an issue with is the Maelstrom also. I think it's a very, basically no T1 BS, besides the Rock maybe, can compete with the Maelstrom at all. And even Macarials are having a hard time competing with the Maelstroms, right? I don't think it's the ship. I think it's the guns that are the issue. Garth Tyrell said that in the Blue Donut earlier, that and I actually agree with him on that one. I think that the guns, the T1 RDs are just way too good. Like, they're just so strong. You can shoot out to almost 200 with T1 RDs on Macarials. Like, a T2 fit, like any other T2 gun in the game can compete with the T1 RDs, basically, right? And if they would somehow change the, so Garth said that if, for example, if they would change the artilleries in a way, the large artilleries in a way that, for example, Macarials, Maelstroms could maybe shoot out to like 50, 70, and Macarials could maybe shoot out to like 7,500 with the fall-off bonus, it would actually make other guns viable again, right? It would make maybe Pulse Apox or something, or like Beam something viable again. But right now it's just not. And I think that CCP is going to nerf the Macarial hull instead of nerfing the guns that are actually causing a problem, but that's
You
just...
think they should nerf the guns, is what you're
I
saying?
think they should nerf
instead
the
of
weapon platform, not the ship. I think the ship itself, I mean, yes, there's probably something you could do about the Macarial. It's very, very strong, but I think one of the reasons it is so strong is the guns as well. And like I said, the best example for that is the Maelstrom, right? The Maelstrom is right now, like I said, by far the most popular T1 BS, and it's super strong. Like, it's really, really tough fighting Maelstrom fleets, which is why we have to swap to fleet comps like these Bush Rocks that we're flying in NC at the moment, or that Init Ravens, that basically the only viable counter to a big Maelstrom fleet, if you don't bring caps. That is, obviously caps are a counter to everything, but right now with South we can't really utilize caps because we don't have capital superiority. So we're faced just in a situation where we only can use subcaps, and then you basically, when Test forms up a 250-man Maelstrom fleet with like 180, 200 Maelstroms, there's basically nothing you can do. There's no way you can fight that with any other battleship except some weird, cheesy, Bush Rock sort of doctrine, which is super fun.
I hope that they will consider tweaking the production requirements on things like faction items, because they're basically outcompeting Tech 2. It's way too easy. You have no skill requirements, and they pretty much only need minerals.
But Tech 2 might go up in price now that you have moon minerals becoming more scarce, probably, and you have transportation costs in the fuel jacking up the price even more so.
Yeah, but it makes no sense that you have an item that is more rare, more valuable, and it's easier to build, because then you're basically nerfing industrialists.
Yeah, well, it's rare unless you have 10,000 people in a system climbing right, looking for the BPCs that drop. But this is good. We're up at 280 people watching live, and I hate to cut the show off when we get there, but I want to get going and start the weekend. I want you guys to do the same thing. We'll be back next week. And first, I want to thank Lee Braga for the subscribe, and Condor Plays for 5 months now subscribing. And Nikolai Mazenkov gave us 100 bits of cheers. Thank you very much. And yeah, so that's all we have. Nice advertising there, Dunk. Thanks, guys, for coming on. I want to thank Killer Bee and Dunk, Dinkle, Carneros, and Caleb for making such an interesting show about economy and warfare this week in EVE. That's all we have this week. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.
Bye.